This is episode 277 of Mitolife Radio. I'm Matt Blackburn, your host, and today we're doing a question and answer. Listener questions that were sent in. It's been a while since I've done one of these. We're going to kick this off with autism. One of the listeners asks, what is the connection between autism and mitochondrial dysfunction? There's a lot of great research studies that have been done looking at this. While mitochondria are often called the powerhouses of the cell that generate energy, they're also responsible for orchestrating proper cellular function overall. So when the mitochondria inside the cells become dysfunctional, that will lead to overall cellular dysfunction and ultimately potentially cell death. So there's a great 2016 study called Mitochondrial Dysfunction in Autism Spectrum Disorders. And they actually summarize various studies that connected different markers of mitochondrial function with autism. So some studies found decreased activity of mitochondrial respiratory chain complexes. Others found presence of biomarkers of oxidative stress. Some found mitochondrial DNA mutations. A 2015 study from Goldenthal found significant mitochondrial respiratory complex chain deficiencies in 42%, almost half of children with autism. So for those that aren't familiar, the mitochondria respiratory chain is where electrons are shuttled across, ultimately to oxygen, and then there's a spinning rotor that generates energy. So if the complexes are dysfunctional, then the electrons cannot move across and you can't create energy properly. And I think when people think about energy, they think about it in a basic idea of, I have energy, I feel great, which is definitely a part of it. You have energy to move your body and energy to think and energy to feel good. And it's definitely one piece. But what I appreciate about Ray Peat's work is that he talked about how energy deficit disturbs cellular structure. And specifically, he talked about how it disturbed the interaction between water, proteins, and other components of the cell. So with that in mind, you can see how an energy deficit can contribute not only to autism spectrum disorder, but to many different diseases. Just look up mitochondrial dysfunction and any chronic condition, and usually there's a link. The good news is we have solutions, and we actually have a really affordable solution called melatonin supplementation. And if you search on PubMed or any research site, melatonin and mitochondria, you'll find tons of research. There's one that specifically reads melatonin reverses mitochondrial dysfunction. There's a great study called Melatonin in Mitochondria, Mitigating Clear and Present Dangers. And this was actually published by a recent podcast guest of mine, Russell J. Ryder, who I consider to be the world's expert on melatonin. And this was a really well-written article. His book's great. He's just a great writer. And in the introduction, it reads, malfunctioning mitochondria contribute to a multitude of disorders referred to as mitochondrial diseases. Some of the most noteworthy examples include Parkinson's, cardiomyopathy, diabetes, cancer, etc. Additionally, many other conditions also involve serious dysfunction of mitochondria: Alzheimer's disease, heavy metal toxicity, ischemia, reperfusion injury, ionizing, and ultraviolet radiation. I'll put the link below to the study so you can read through it. But the last part I'll read from it says, herein we summarize the means by which melatonin reduces mitochondrial irregularities resulting from excessive oxidative stress or as a consequence of the transformation of normal cells to the cancerous phenotype, as well as its role in mitochondrial dynamics. Also, we summarize the evidence that melatonin has ready access to and is also synthesized in mitochondria. These features put melatonin in the optimal location to counteract oxidative stress and to reprogram the faulty glucose metabolism of cancer cells from the cytosol to the mitochondria. These findings have obvious implications for combating mitochondria-related diseases and for curtailing cancer cell growth and metastasis. So one of the highlights there that I think should perk your ears up is that melatonin is made in the mitochondria, because it was my understanding for the first half of my health journey that melatonin was synthesized in the pineal gland. And I parroted that. I repeated it for several years, probably 8-10 years, something like that. And it actually turned out to be false to some degree, because only 5% of melatonin production occurs in the pineal gland. That's pretty important to know. The other 95% is produced inside our mitochondria throughout our body. And in another Russell Ryder article titled Melatonin and Pathological Cell Interactions, he notes that melatonin production in the mitochondria is produced in a non-circadian manner, which is another eye-opener, because coming from the quantum health realm, and there's some good stuff there, but I think it's been taken way too far off the deep end with the grounding, the sunlight, watching sunrises and sunsets, wearing blue blockers at night. That's all great basic stuff. I don't think you're going to die if you don't watch sunsets and sunrises every day, but it can definitely help if someone's transitioning out of being a night shift worker or just having dysregulated sleep for decades of their life. I think that's where being barefoot on the beach, watching a sunrise, same thing with the sunset every day, can have a huge impact for certain people, but not for everyone. And it's definitely not a cure-all. The reason why I bring all of this up is because blue light, green light, certain wavelengths of light that's inside of the white light that we're exposed to from light bulbs, that suppresses melatonin production, and also the intensity of the light might play more of a role than the actual wavelengths. I personally do both. I use my friend Adam's bulbs from Healthy Home Shop. So you flip the switch and you can turn it to an orange glow. So that's all my light at night. And it's pretty dim in my cabin at night. So I'm covering my two bases there. I'm not getting blue light, green light, and I'm also not getting very bright, intense light. But that said, that's only protecting 5% of my melatonin production, where the other 95% is produced inside the mitochondria in a non-circadian manner, which means that it's not connected to the light-dark cycle or sleep-wake cycle. And there's also another aspect of EMFs suppressing melatonin production. So artificial light, ALAN as it's called, artificial light at night, that is one of the biggest sources of EMF in people's lives, but also Wi-Fi, cell phone towers, electric fields coming off the wiring in your walls, dirty electricity. There's several different sources of EMF, and they all have an impact on our mitochondrial melatonin production. So how do you protect against that? That's where supplementation comes into play, because to combat that, depending on the intensity, especially if you're in a population dense area, you're in an apartment, you're in a condo, you're just sandwiched in between a million signals in a dense city with a lot of people, supplementation is critical, in my opinion. You cannot get enough nutrients out of food to combat that. So for years, my number one solution was magnesium. And then I added in shilajit, which the fulvic and humic acid, as they've been trending now for the last 5 years, I probably played a huge role in that. that has a huge effect on strengthening your system and balancing your whole system at the mineral level to handle EMFs better and not to have as much oxidative stress produced, reactive oxygen species. But as I've learned more, especially over the last couple of years, there are several other nutrients that play a role, namely vitamin E, not just alpha tocopherol, but gamma tocopherol form as well, which balances the alpha tocopherol. So those two together, ideally in a mixed tocopherol solution, where you also have beta and delta tocopherols. Those are the four isomers of tocopherols. The gamma and the alpha balance each other. So all of the cancer scare about vitamin E supplementation increasing cancer risk, that all comes from people taking isolated alpha tocopherol, which is the most common vitamin E supplement, instead of the more efficacious, way safer mixed tocopherol, where the gamma balances out the alpha. So vitamin E and vitamin C are a really powerful combo to take daily for EMF protection. And there's several studies on that. There's a 2017 study titled Vitamin C and Vitamin E protected cells from apoptosis induced by intermittent 50 hertz ELF EMF radiation. So vitamin C is a water-soluble antioxidant, which means it's not stored in fat. So you need to take that daily. Vitamin E is a fat-soluble vitamin that can be stored in your liver and other fatty portions of your body. It gets stored inside the mitochondria to protect it from oxidative stress. And I think that's also one to take daily when we think about how much polyunsaturated fatty acids we've consumed in our lifetime in the form of concentrated seed oils, canola oil, different vegetable oils that all our food was cooked with. I know mine was cooked with for the first 30 years of my life. And then you could also look at zinc. That mineral is really important, especially for someone like myself that has a history of raw veganism, vegetarianism for a long time. Usually there's a copper excess there and a zinc deficiency. So if you decide to megadose zinc, as I've done, you want to also be taking counterintuitively some copper to balance it out, even if you have quote unquote copper toxicity or excess copper. Another nutrient is selenium. That also protects from EMFs, and that is also a antioxidant mineral. One that I've never talked about before is the amino acid carnosine. And there was a study on the effect of carnosine in the cerebellum of rats exposed to 900 megahertz EMF. And they found that carnosine protected the cerebellum from neuronal damage. Carnosine, in my opinion, is one of those underrated supplements with so many properties that protect against advanced glycation end products, which have a major role in type 2 diabetes, protects against diabetes, supports muscular health, protects the brain. And when it's combined with zinc, it's been found to protect the stomach lining and even heal the lesions in the mucosa to protect from inflammation and reduce oxidative stress in the intestinal tract. That's why I chose that specific form for Mitolife Zinc, because I feel that everybody's intestinal tract is inflamed, and zinc carnosine is one of the best things to take daily for that, to calm the storm that's happening in your intestines every day, which affect everything else. Endotoxin can flow through and stress out your entire system. We always want to be supporting our intestinal tract function. And a lot of people just focus on prebiotics, probiotics, postbiotics. All that stuff can be great, but how about sealing up the gut from the damage and the lesions that occur from insults? That's what zinc carnosine can do. But getting back to its antioxidant capability, For years, I was talking about the magnesium burn rate and how fast we're using up our magnesium under stress. But that also applies to all other nutrients. And in the context of EMFs, that is an oxidative stress. And whether it's from natural sources such as the sun, but you're getting excessive amounts of ultraviolet radiation, that is also an oxidative stressor. So you're going to use up your antioxidants, including all of the nutrients I mentioned before: ascorbic acid, zinc, selenium, magnesium, vitamin E. All of those nutrients and more are going to be used up to blunt the oxidative stress that occurs in the presence of EMFs. But I think that the antioxidant amino acid carnosine is off of most people's radar. And that's why I have it in the Mitolife supplement. And in each capsule, you get 75 milligrams. And if you're building up your zinc levels and taking a lot of zinc in like a building phase to get back to normal, then that 75 milligrams of zinc per capsule adds up very quickly. I mean, there have been many days where I get up to a gram a day of carnosine just from taking my zinc carnosine supplement. So I bring all of this up, starting with melatonin, because that's really an underrated one for EMF protection and protecting your overall health. If you live in a city, if you are always in a Wi-Fi bubble 24/7, all the nutrients that I mentioned are super important. And I don't think one is any better than the other, but I would definitely be taking vitamin C and vitamin E every single day. Definitely melatonin and zinc every day as well. I think I'm one of the only people talking about this, maybe the only one in the natural health community, because when you hear about EMF solutions, they all include maybe those quantum health principles of just be barefoot outside 24/7 as much as you possibly can, work outside with your laptop, which I think is super extreme, get as much sunlight as possible, see as many sunrises and sunsets as possible. And as I said, for some people, that could be the cure. That could be the solution for some people, but it's not a one size fit all. And a lot of people do need supplemental support. I've listened to a lot of the influencers with a large following that talk about light, water, and magnetism, but they'll also promote devices. And I'm definitely not against technology, health devices. I'm a huge fan, but a lot of them talk about these quantum dots, stickers, things you place on your phone, necklaces. Most of that is BS. There's only one that I talk about, and it's Blue Shield. I've had several interviews with Brandon Amalani on the show. He's the US distributor for that New Zealand created technology, but that's not a total protection. That's not even the first line of defense. I would first look at your nutrition, look at your supplements specifically before you go to a scalar emitting device like the Blue Shield. There's one company that's selling giant wooden cylinders that have kind of a copper band in it and around it. And that's supposed to generate a field using depolarization that protects your home from EMFs. And those range anywhere from $1,200 for their small unit all the way up to $6,500 for their biggest unit. And to me, that technology is complete BS and it doesn't work and it's pseudoscience. That particular company that I'm talking about says that they have 20 plus studies of that technology working. And when you click the link on their website, it doesn't link to 20 studies. So they're making a claim and they're not backing it up. So that company, that technology, in my opinion, is BS. And that goes for a lot of these natural health EMF protection companies that pop up out of the blue. We really should be focusing on the nutrients that I talked about, not these EMF protection technologies. If you want to play around with those, if you have cash to experiment, those are secondary. And I think the problem comes when these companies send out products for free to people with a following, and they dangle an affiliate commission percentage in front of them that's very enticing. And unfortunately, most people take it. I haven't been offered that over the years, I think, because I put out a energy of authenticity that might intimidate companies that are not authentic like that. But I've seen this with water filters. I've seen this with air filter companies. And I've also seen it specifically with EMF protection devices, where that is their whole marketing. It's built on sending out free product and having affiliates blow it up and make it seem legitimate to their following. And it's really unfortunate. Here I am talking about nutrients. Yes, I mentioned Mitolife, zinc, but buy these nutrients wherever. I'd appreciate if you bought your vitamin C and vitamin E and melatonin and zinc from Mitolife. That'd be great. And half my product line is now in biodegradable bottles, and the lids break down as well in a landfill. And I pay a premium per bottle for that. And other companies just don't care. They're still selling their products for decades in plastic bottles, and they haven't looked at alternatives like I have with those bio bottles. There's also the fact that we use bamboo silica as the excipient. Still blows my mind. New products that I tried a new brand the last couple weeks, and half of their product line contained titanium dioxide in the other ingredient list, which is just ridiculous for a high-end supplement brand. That really kills any integrity with them, in my opinion, if they have that really crappy excipient in their products. And that's what inspired me to start Mitolife in the first place. Just seeing the state of the natural health community, and specifically the quality of supplements, and just all of the confusion out there around liposomal and all of these super lab made. I mean, people freak out about synthetic, quote unquote, vitamin C, ascorbic acid. When you get to the form of micelle, liposomal, a lot of these really boutique supplement brands that sell mostly liquid forms of supplements in pouches. Sure, the marketing and presentation might be nice, but I much prefer just plain old encapsulated powdered supplements, specifically when it comes to supplements that can oxidize, like vitamin C and melatonin, if they're exposed to oxygen for a while. And you could test this yourself by buying Now Foods brand vitamin C ascorbic acid bulk powder and leaving the lid off, or pouring some out and just leaving it on your counter for a while. And you'll see the color change. It'll turn brown or yellow. That means it's reacted with oxygen. And the same goes for melatonin. Bulk melatonin powder will oxidize. And when you think about whether it's a jar or a bag, opening it over and over to take scoops of it out, that is very counterproductive. I would much rather take encapsulated melatonin, encapsulated vitamin C, because the shelf life is going to be significantly longer. I know we started with autism and I went way off track, but I'm just going to continue my rants here. While we're on the topic of shelf life, this is a really interesting area of research to me because I'm such a prepper. People often think of long-term storage of freeze-dried foods, dehydrated foods. I'm often thinking about long-term storage of supplements for an emergency situation, and vitamin C is one of the best. There's a study called Stability of Vitamin C, Ascorbic Acid in Tablets, 1976, from Rubin et al. And what they found was that there was a 95% potency retention, not reduction, retention, over 5 years. So that means if you have a bottle of vitamin C that's sealed, because they did a sealed and unsealed test, so in enclosed bottles at room temperature, And that's where they had the 95% retention in the power of the vitamin C. When it was open and stored at room temperature, there was a 0 to 2% loss of potency. So I just wanted to share that because if you're like me, you like to prepare for future possibilities and have some stuff stockpiled, and vitamin C is great for that. A listener asked, what are essential daily supplements? And then a question about timing and combining supplements, which people tend to hyper focus on. I wouldn't get too hung up on the timing and combining of supplements. When you look at food, especially if you're eating a balanced meal containing all three macronutrients together, you're going to have a lot of competing nutrients, competing minerals, competing vitamins, and that's just how it works. And I think the timing and questioning what you can combine as far as supplements together, that tends to just overwhelm people and make it more complicated than it needs to be. The most important thing with supplements is to take them regularly. That's it. Everything else is really a 1% impact, in my opinion. As far as what supplements to take daily, I really focus on the fat soluble vitamins. So A, D, E, and K. And D is often the most emphasized, probably K2 second to that. Vitamin A, I would say, gets third place for attention. And then always last place is vitamin E, and especially the tocopherols, not just alpha, but the mixed tocopherols, the gamma, the delta, the beta. You really want to take a mixed tocopherol vitamin E because a lot of the scare articles about increasing cancer risk, that's just isolated alpha isomer. But when you have gamma to balance it out, then you don't see any deleterious effects. So I sell a K2 product with both MK4 and MK7, and then K1 in there as well, and then mixed tocopherol vitamin E. We don't have a concentrated source of A and D. There's some in beef liver, but I encourage people, and I have for years, to get their retinol from dairy sources and their vitamin D, if they can genetically get it from sunlight, if their body is able to make those conversions. But if not, then finding a good vitamin D supplement and balancing it out with K2, but also the other fat soluble vitamins. This is a great question from a listener. What are supplements for managing microclots? And he put long haul in parentheses. So we're talking about the C infection. I found an interesting article from 2018, Indiana University School of Medicine. Says they developed a nanoparticle technology to dissolve life-threatening blood clots. Almost 1 million Americans develop blood clots each year, and I'm sure that number's skyrocketed to the moon the last 3 or 4 years. And it says clots are especially dangerous when they travel to the lungs, a condition known as pulmonary embolism. And also it can cut off the blood flow so badly that it kills suddenly. And later on it reads, typically a natural occurring enzyme called plasmin chews up the blood clots, but when a clot is too big, the body can't produce plasmin quick enough. So some scientists have used drugs that activates plasmin into overdrive, but then that creates other issues like hemorrhage and bleeding in the brain. And then these researchers at Indiana University were using a nanoparticle technology. And this is where I feel like the transhumanism, better living through science, really gets it wrong, because we try to reinvent the wheel when we already have the solution right in front of our face. And that solution is systemic enzymes, nattokinase and serrapeptase, these proteolytic enzymes. And systemic, meaning whole body, they travel throughout the body, eating up excess fibrin. Fibrin is a protein. That's the major structure. It's essential for the blood clot. And so systemic enzymes go in there and actually break up that fibrin structure, thereby breaking up the blood clot. I often say that enzyme therapy was one of my biggest lessons that I took out of my raw vegan journey 14 years ago. The power of enzymes to heal, I think, are underrated. And supplemental. Yes, there's enzymes in fresh fruit and vegetables, but it's if you're growing them yourself. Most people are not. They're buying them from the store. They've been picked weeks ago. And so the enzyme potential is going to be a lot less than if you have your own garden, you pick it and you're eating it within ideally 5-10 minutes. That said, those enzymes are not going to have the effect that supplemental serrapeptase and nattokinase has on scar tissue, fibrin throughout your body. So I take 3 to 6 capsules. Lately, it's been 6 capsules of Dissolvidol. That's the Mitolife systemic enzymes every morning when I wake up. And then I'll wait maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes or so, and then eat breakfast. And what's cool about these enzymes is they don't just work in that moment. They actually circulate for roughly 24 hours. There's a lot of variables, how much scar tissue you have, but they'll circulate for around 24 hours, eating up excess fibrin and therefore increasing blood flow, decreasing inflammation, and just improving organ, gland function, systemic health all around. This is an interesting question. A listener asked, should we worry about nanotechnology inside of us? So I used to be a teacher's assistant and then later a substitute teacher at a juvenile hall detention facility. And I loved bringing in cool documentaries that I downloaded onto a USB thumb drive and showed them interesting, Nova documentaries. A lot of it was Michio Kaku, the physicist, talking about the future and future technology and how it's going to affect our lives. And I remember there was a show on, several on nanoparticles that he talked about applying it to gardens in order to keep track of the hydration status of a farmer's crop and the need for which chemicals, because the particles would be in the leaves, and analyze exactly what nutrients they need and on and on. It makes sense that things are hidden from us, like really advanced technology we hear about decades later, stuff being developed, at Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and corporations like that definitely have some hidden technology, I'm sure, that we're not going to hear about for a long time. But I think as far as being aware of stuff that affects our health, I really think it's a distraction. I saw a YouTube video years ago of a guy filtering nanoparticles supposedly out of red wine and saying that you could drink nano-free red wine when you mix oil with it and spin it. And it was this whole elaborate, time-consuming process. And then there's also berries, because berries are so porous, like strawberries, raspberries, that those are supposedly just sponges for nanoparticles. I think we just have to focus on, as I was talking about before, the fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin C, where are your B vitamins coming in, where are your minerals coming in, macrominerals, microminerals. I think Shilajit covers a lot of bases, so I take 5 tablets of those every morning, always supplementing magnesium every day in different forms, bathing in magnesium as much as you can. And as far as the sodium, potassium, calcium, if you're eating a balanced diet, you should be getting those. I salt all my food pretty heavily to taste. Calcium, ideally from high quality dairy that agrees with your body. And potassium, it's in dairy as well, and also in a lot of fruit and produce. And if you're covering all those bases, like a listener earlier was asking about the daily essential supplements to take, if you're aware of that, and then maybe over years, depending on finances, getting little devices, maybe a blood cleaner that uses 50 to 100 microamperes on the wrist to clean your blood for about $300. I talk about that on my Mitolife Academy. Maybe a strong PEMF device, not the cheap ones, the brands that just pulse the 60 hertz signal from the wall into your body, but actual high quality pulsed electromagnetic field therapy that could potentially fry the little nanobots that are floating around the body. Who knows? But that's kind of my approach to it. Cover all the foundational stuff and then play around with technology. I'm sure that a lot of people that are concerned about the nanotechnology, maybe because they watched some YouTube videos on it, are severely mineral imbalanced, vitamin imbalanced, and have not gotten maybe the Oligo scan or an HTMA, or really worked hard on balancing their system. We all have deficiencies. I was just interviewed on my friend Vanessa's show, and I was talking about how it's important to look back at your life growing up and your exposures. Personally, I was exposed to a ton of chlorine, probably bromine and fluoride, a lot of halogens, because I frequented pools and jacuzzis. My whole first 2 decades of my life, I was in pools and jacuzzis a lot. And I was already having acne and eczema, which are sure signs of nutrient deficiencies, vitamin deficiencies specifically, and ascorbate, vitamin E, vitamin A, iodine, just a lot of nutrients. And so I'm assuming the first at least 2 decades of my life, probably 3 decades of my life, I was iodine and ascorbate deficient, meaning vitamin C deficient, because both of those are hammered, significantly hammered with chlorine exposure and just pool exposure in general, YMCA, chlorinated or brominated pools. The listener asked, can Encephalon and lithium be taken while on an antidepressant? So it's definitely something to consult with your doctor about, but I can say as non-medical advice, for those that aren't familiar, Encephalon is a Mitolife supplement that contains a microalgae. It's called Brain Fit, which is a Phyodactylum microalgae that contains a lot of really interesting compounds with neuro benefits, neurotropic benefits. And it also contains phosphatidylserine and ginkgo biloba extract. And both of those are monoamine oxidase inhibitors. And phosphatidylserine inhibits monoamine oxidase, or MAOB, and ginkgo biloba actually inhibits both A and B. So generally mixing MAO inhibitors with antidepressants can cause something called serotonin syndrome. So if it were me on antidepressants, I would definitely work with an experienced practitioner that is of the mindset that people can get off of those and work on weaning off and adding in natural mood stabilizers like those compounds that I talked about. Listener asked about tinnitus. He said molecular hydrogen or ozone in the ears. I think ozone in the ears, like from the Crucial 4 device, pumping ozone gas through the ears, especially after a shower, and the ears have been hydrated, so it's not just drying out your ear. That's really beneficial. Tinnitus is an interesting one. I've asked a lot of my guests over the last 3 years 3 or 4 years about the root cause of tinnitus. And I've heard various things that it's a magnesium deficiency, that it's caused by electromagnetic radiation, that it's caused by excess copper. It's interesting, ginkgo leaf extract, there's a 2008 study showing that ginkgo leaf extract had a beneficial effect on tinnitus. Mateo Johnson on my show said that he's seen molecular hydrogen help with tinnitus. And with his Axiom H2 device, you can put hydrogen right into your ears. I would say one of the most underrated things for tinnitus is vitamin C, because electromagnetic fields, I believe, definitely influence the development of tinnitus, and vitamin C can help to protect from the deleterious effects of EMFs and keep the oxidative stress down. This is a great question. Someone asked, do you agree with everyone adding salt to their drinking water? Definitely not. The ideal way to do it is to invest in a high quality water filtration unit like the Mitolife 7-stage. A lot of people are using reverse osmosis filters, which strip the water down but don't remineralize it. So the idea behind adding salt to the water is that the salt will dissolve and you're remineralizing the water. A lot of salt is contaminated. That's part of it. There's microplastics, there's C4 explosive residue. Unless you source it carefully and spend a little extra. My friend Charles over at Crucial 4 sells Icelandic sea salt that's really clean. Then it might be worth doing, but the salt that people are using, Himalayan and Celtic, definitely not a good idea. The best is to invest in a water filter that remineralizes the water, like the Mitolife filter. So it has a media called Corasex at the end, where the water passes through this media, and the media releases various forms of magnesium bicarbonate being one of those forms. It's not a super high amount, like equivalent to the magnesium bicarbonate concentrate that you can make. But the whole idea is to make the water less aggressive by adding minerals to it. So it doesn't want to grab whatever material. If you have it in a stainless steel bottle, it's not going to leach that into the water. Listener asked, why didn't you like being back in San Diego, other than the obvious California issues? I definitely felt naked not having a firearm on me whenever I left the house. Mainly it was the hot and dry environment. So I was born and raised in San Diego, particularly Ocean Beach, for the first 20 years of my life. And the beach environment is a little better, but it's essentially a desert. And if water was not pumped from the Colorado River in Northern California, it would be very dry. And it's already dry for me being down there with the humidity level. Whenever I come back to Idaho, I feel like I can breathe again. The humidity level is perfect. I love the cool, crisp air. That's something I didn't experience for the first 30 years of my life until I moved to the mountains. Part of it might be just not being in a very population dense area. Generally, when you're in the mountains, you have a lot more space and you're not crammed like sardines together with other people in a neighborhood. I do think that different people thrive in different environments, and I think that that even goes beyond genetics. There's a genetic component to that, but it's wild to me that people never move. They're in the same environment for their entire life, the same part of one state. And to me, that's just crazy. And there's definitely a balance. I have friends that, have traveled the world and are just constantly on the move. That would kill me. That sounds just exhausting. And moving your life is definitely a workout. I've done it since I moved to Idaho at least 3 or 4 times now, moving across the country, taking my animals, all my belongings. And it's a full body workout and a mental workout as well. But it can be worth it if you feel better in a different environment. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. They have a chronic health condition, and that health condition manifested in that environment that they're stuck in. And to make that leap of faith that, hey, I'm going to try moving to this different state if you're in the US, or this different region, wherever you are in the world, that has a different topography, that has different humidity, has different population density, that can make a massive difference in your overall health. I can't imagine how it would feel if I stayed in the desert environment. I would not be mentally as clear. I would not be as energized. My mood would not be as stable. And that's every time I go down to Southern California, that's how I feel. I can't wait to get out of there because I love being in the rainforest, which is where I live. Up here, it is technically a rainforest. And I get the 4 seasons. So I get to enjoy the winter, the snow, the hibernation of that time. So just wanted to throw that out there. I don't think there's an ideal environment for everybody, but I really encourage you, if you don't feel good overall, to consider where you're living and consider making a move to a different environment and just live there for a year or so and take note of your mood, your energy, your mental clarity. You'd be surprised. It can make a massive difference. Someone asked, I think you said you aren't using the Magnetico sleep pad anymore. Are you going to use it again? So just to catch you guys up, if you're not familiar, I interviewed Dr. Dean Bonley when he was still alive, and he invented this sleeping pad very specifically with hundreds of magnets inside of it, and you place it under the mattress, and there's either 5 Gauss, 10 Gauss, or 20 Gauss strength, and it goes up to 200, 400 pounds roughly for the whole thing. So there's 4 mats with their super system, and you stack 2 on top of each other on one side if it's a king bed, and then 2 on the other side of the bed. And it creates this very strong magnetic field. And the ingenuity of the Magnetico is you don't get the positive polarity hitting your body. Only the negative polarity hits your body. And that's the way that they designed it. And so that you're not mimicking acupuncture, which tires the body if you do that daily, because this is a type of acupuncture, is how he described it, using magnets. I think I've told this story before on the podcast, but when I was living in an RV and there was a power line above the bed of my RV because I didn't have a choice of the location, I bought a Magnetico sleep pad, and it absolutely transformed my sleep, sleeping under a power line. And by under a power line, I mean it was only 20 feet underneath, and I slept under there for about a year or so, and I slept great thanks to the Magnetico. So in situations like that, it can help to shield from your environment, and I highly recommend the Magnetico investment if you're in a situation like that where you don't have control over your environment. Maybe you're in a apartment or a condominium where there's 20 Wi-Fi signals impacting your body every single night, all night long while you're sleeping. In that case, I would either go for a Magnetico sleep pad or a Faraday cage canopy around your bed, which isn't practical if you sleep with your animals. I love sleeping with my cats, and so a Faraday canopy is not really practical there because you have to shield it from the bottom and all the way around. And so my cats would not be able to jump up. And I think there's huge benefits to the frequency of purring And whether you're sleeping with a dog or a cat, I think that is tremendous for health and underrated. So in that context, the magnetico would be superior because that's creating an invisible barrier in a way. But more so, it's just strengthening your body, increasing the rate of chemical reactions. And it's just a great tool to have in the right situation. Because I've lived so remote for most of the last 4 years here in Idaho, I opt for grounding rod to earth. And if you can't see your neighbors or hear them, and there's a lot of space in between you and your neighbors, that is really where grounding sheets shine. And as soon as I purchased this property, I hammered a rod into the earth. My bedroom's on the second story, and ran that up through the deck, through my bedroom window. And I've been sleeping on that grounding sheet. And I really feel the difference if I don't use it. So I make sure to have backups just in case if it gets lost or the cats throw up on it or whatever happens, that I have another one in the closet ready to go, because I know how good I feel when I sleep grounded. And so I don't go a night without it. And I often remind people, if you go camping, that is the best time to bring your grounding sheet with you with the rod kit and put that outside your tent. Or if you're sleeping on one of those tent hammocks that's elevated between two trees, still run a cord up. It makes a huge difference in your sleep quality. This is a great question. How to get a 20 plus year smoker to quit. So she's asking a cigar aficionado, I'm referring to myself here, with a humidor that's always stocked, but I can go days and sometimes even weeks without smoking a cigar. So I question the addictive nature that is often attributed to nicotine. I would say that it's not the molecule itself that's addictive. The addictive part is using it to de-stress, to take the edge off. And in my opinion, stress is the number one killer. And most people are chronically stressed. That is apparent on social media with all of the debates in the comment section and really the combative nature of people on the internet. That is a sign that people are stressed out, easily triggered. Ideally, we want to be resilient, or at least moving in that direction of nervous system resilience, where our capacity to handle stressors in our life is significant. We have a large bucket of which to fill, and then eventually, with hopefully healthier habits that aren't hard drugs, we are able to dump that bucket occasionally to gain back our capacity. And there are endless things: meditation, exercise, weightlifting, walking, and of course, a million different health technologies out there that can support our nervous system. Eating a balanced diet, all the macronutrients every day, getting enough sugar in every day, and enough protein. It's really about finding the right combination of all of those things and whatever else you choose that works. And circling back to nicotine or tobacco, I think people are using that, if it's throughout the day, several times a day, they're using it to blunt the effects of stress. So in my opinion, it's really the all throughout the day use that's a problem. So a smoker that's smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, day in and day out for weeks, for months, for years, really have to ask the question, what are they using it for? Is it for the cognitive benefits? Okay, well, if that's the case, then they better be on ascorbic acid, vitamin C, and vitamin E, with all of the studies on those two vitamins mitigating the deleterious effects of smoking. I would guess that 90+% of people smoking are not taking either of those vitamins and or not taking them in high enough amounts to make a difference. And that is where the problem lies to me with the whole subject of tobacco and smoking. It's not supporting the system. And if you want to get crazy, you add in things like halotherapy once a day. That's in a salt chamber, breathing salt particles into your respiratory tract, into your lungs, which really help to clear it out and keep the health of that system in top shape. If you go to YouTube and search salt therapy, Mitolife Radio, you can listen to my interview that I did with the founder of Salt Chamber. So I'm going to have to wrap this episode up because it's been a pretty hectic week, to be honest. And it's just been very chaotic. So irregular meals. I've just been burning the candle at both ends. So if you want to listen to more Q&As like this, check out the Mitolife Academy. That's my YouTube channel. It's $15 a month. You get 2 videos every month and then a live Q&A the last day of every month, where for usually about 2 hours, I'll answer unlimited questions from the subscribers. My website's matt-blackburn.com. You can read about my CLF protocol and then see all of my recommended products. Most of them have discount codes. And then my brand is Mitolife. You can find that at mitolife.co. We just released a new shower filter. So under the shop, there's 3 tabs: living, water, and wellness. Under the water tab, you can find the KDF shower solution. It's selling very quickly. We already sold through our first batch and people are loving it. We also have a new coffee product. It's small batch. This particular batch is from Brazil. You can find that under the living tab. And then we recently lowered the price on a few more products. So now is the right time to try some supplements from us if you've been eyeing them. The Encephalon just got a lower price, as well as the Jellyfish Jolt product. Both of those are incredible for the brain, and especially combined in the morning. Recommend trying that combination, maybe with some coffee or caffeine, and let me know how your brain's feeling after that. Well, that is all for today. I'll see you guys next Friday. Stay supercharged.